This is my dream home, but if you can hear what's involved and the hardships and the stress and the perseverance that you need and still take it on, I think that's a win.
Building involves more than just personal style. It's about budget, functionality, working with your specific site, and making sure your home seamlessly integrates into your life. I'm Sam Payne, and welcome to Australian Build Stories. Join me as we chat with real people who have embarked on their own building journey. We'll explore their highs, lows, and valuable lessons they learned along the way. Australian Build Stories, building knowledge one story at a time. Welcome back to Australian Build Stories, or if this is your first time, thanks for joining us. In today's episode, commercial interior architect and multi-builder renovator Tenille Teakle is joining us to talk about her forever home or long-term family home that her and her husband Jimmy have built together. And they do have a little bit of experience having built a project home and having had renovated another home in the past. This was different because it was their long-term home and there was a lot more that went into it. And there's the benefit of Tenille's background in commercial interior architecture plus her project experience gives a lot of insights for people who are going through the journey at the moment or who are ready to tackle that journey. The home is really beautiful. I'll put some photos on social media and on australianbuildstories.com. It's worth noting that the images don't do it justice. It feels very different when you're there walking through it. If you're in Perth, there have been a couple of home open type events there that you might be able to keep your eyes out for. It's called Karijini House, and you can find it on Instagram under that tag. And today's episode is proudly sponsored by Home-Based Design and Build Centre, Australia's largest building and renovation destination.
So 6.5 years was made up of 3 years in design and 3.5 years on site. We started out with a 2-year plan.
Yeah. Were you looking for land for a long time till you found this block?
Oh, I reckon like a good 2 or 3 years. And we had such a broad net of areas we were looking in. And it was really just looking for something unique that we could work with. And
then going into it, did you have an idea of what the house was going to be or what it would look like before finding the block, or was it?
No, we didn't. We had a trip planned up to Karijini. We had our little dog, a little sausage dog, Django, that came with us, and we did 6 weeks sleeping in the back of Jimmy's car. So we'd recently just purchased the block, maybe a couple of months earlier or a month earlier. It had settled. And so our very first sketch planning was done in the back of Jimmy's car, camping around the northwestern part of Australia. And so because we were both so overwhelmed with our work life at the time, both doing 60, 70-hour weeks and not having a lot of time for ourselves or well-being, we both said, I think we were in Karijini at this time of the trip, God, this place feels amazing. We are so present, we're connected, we're lost, no one else knows exactly where we are. We're surrounded by nature all the time and we both feel so calm. We don't feel overwhelmed. Why can't we feel like this at home every night? What do we need to change in our lives to bottle up this feeling and take it home? And we actually now have an opportunity in front of us to do that. We've just bought a block and we're just starting design. And so Karijini House was born of this idea that we want to feel like we feel right now in the home we build, and that's our measure of success.
For people who are wanting to go through the process themselves, how should they be thinking about a design narrative?
It's very personal, and I think it needs to be responsive to the individuals embarking on the project and the block. A design narrative for me is one overarching sentence or group of sentences that is the essence and the soul of the home. And every time you feel lost on the journey, overwhelmed by choices between this or that, whether it's usually a cost decision as well, that is your guiding principle, your guiding light. And it's so easy to get lost on the journey because there's too many options. You know, if you have that strong narrative, I mean, I even went through it as a design professional myself. We couldn't pick the finishes for the upstairs here, and I got lost in wanting white rendered walls and very light and airy and everything matching. And he's the one who pulled me up and said, it's not on brand. It's not on brief. The brief is Karijini. I mean, the bathroom tiles, a perfect example. I didn't love anything I was finding, but it took me 2 years to pick the bathroom tiles because I knew that it had to be like bathing under a waterfall in Karijini. I wanted you to feel that texture and the trickling water, and you're very dark and immersive in that experience, and to feel connected to that. And so it just kept pushing me to keep looking and keep looking. And I think that's why the home feels so considered and cohesive. Each room isn't designed in isolation. There's not lots of, but I like that. It's like there's one guiding principle to replicate the experience of being in Karijini and the calm, connected feeling you get from it.
I guess what I want to explore is, so you mentioned this is your dream home, or some people call them forever homes, or which means we want to be here for a long time and we're going to make decisions with that mindset. How can a design narrative, or how do you think a design narrative can be applied to homes that might not sit in that category? Do you still think about using them then, or is it...
Yeah, every design project should have a narrative, even if it's a reno, because I think design is the most compelling when it's cohesive and all considered. Like, I see so many of these home reno shows where they're designing based on trends and each room is designed in isolation, and there's not cohesion of one idea. Design narrative really is just what's our one design idea that is going to thread its way through every design decision, from your layout, from your scale, to your finishes and fixtures and hardware and furniture.
For people who are thinking about going down the path, what are some conversations or activities that you think they should do so that when they talk to their design team, their project team, they're well prepared to drive that approach?
I would just talk to feelings and experiences of once you're living in the home, as opposed to, I like concrete and I like black hardware and I like bright furniture or whatever. If you talk to, we want to feel this when we come home, we wanted to feel calm, connected and present and connected to nature. Part of that is just reducing the clutter. So I had to design in enough joinery, enough places so the clutter always had a place. Yeah, how you want the home to feel, and then what are the trips you've been on, what's from your childhood, what is personal to you that's really important to build in. And you don't have to understand how it could connect to architecture. Just tell your design team those elements.
Yep. I think it's a really interesting point, and it's come up in some of the other podcasts in terms of sometimes people don't consider that depending on how the home has been put together, it's going to totally change how you feel in it. And it's such a big part of what good architecture can do. It can make you feel better in the morning, and you start and end your day at your home. So it should help with that. But it is something that often I don't think from a client side of things, people are tapped into that side of it. They're thinking 4x2, they're thinking pools, they're thinking these individual elements.
Yes. And I don't think unless you're from a design background, you understand how that designer's mind works in what can create inspiration. I mean, once we had Karijini, we didn't know how Karijini would manifest, but once we established that was our ultimate goal and measure of success, it influenced everything. I mean, Karijini is very famous for its, horizontal banding of rock, these beautiful rock formations that are carved over time and thousands or millennials of years of water rushing through the gorges. This horizontal banding influenced our decision to do face brick, to choose the brick that we chose because it's a really skinny format, it's only 47 mil high. It influenced the decision to do running bond, not stack bond or not anything else. It just influenced the decision to do the raked joints because then that accentuates this horizontal banding. Even the rammed earth has banding across it every 600 mil. Lots of breezeways in the home, all horizontal banding. If you look around, that is a really strong design influence. It's in all my tiling choices. Bulkheads run the same. It's subtle, but it's there, and most people couldn't articulate that there's a cohesion with that element. And yeah, it does feel like Karijini. It is influenced. It feels like jagged rock face. But without that initial guiding principle, we might have done a brick rendered home or, like still the same layout, but a very different feel.
Yes, that's where it acts as that sort of North Star through the process.
It is.
And then the design narrative was developed, and then you went through the process of doing the design and using the design narrative as the North Star. Did you have any early contractor involvement to get an idea on like price at that stage, or what was that next stage like?
We did. We had an original builder involved that priced it, I think, at DA. And at the time, our budget was a lot less. It was probably maybe $500,000 over budget at the time. And we just went into like crisis mode a little bit. I've done plenty of value engineering in my professional career, so I know how to do it. But what we did and the way we approached carving back the cost is, I think at the time we pulled the basement back, we shrunk the size of it, and we just, in a very itemized cost budget, went through and said, we'll make this cost, and we just dropped costs across a few trade packages, and then said in the next design phase in construction documentation, we'll just figure out and work with the trades how we hit those targets.
So were they provisional sums?
They become provisional sums, yeah. We ended up not proceeding with the original builder, and then we were stuck with the problem of, do we tender it? Do we find a new builder to do this early contractor involvement approach that we were preferring? And then at that time, we were catching up a lot with our neighbours because we were here at the block, I don't know, spending time here and looking at how we plant trees and looking at where the viewpoints were that we wanted to achieve, and we'd become quite friendly, and our neighbour had just started a building business, and I think the convenience of thinking he's going to be across the road, he's now a good trusted friend, this all seems to be falling into place. And so at that point, and we also at the time approached several builders, and most of them said, we won't price your project unless you commit to using us. And we just felt like so backed into a corner to commit to a builder that we might get the same cost feedback where we're so far over budget, but then how can we claw that back? And I can really understand builders at the time were saying, it's about 100 hours to price a project, but I'd never worked with any of them before. And there were a few client testimonials I could have followed up, but I just felt that I wanted a price, and the builder we ended up going with was so flexible with our contract terms, and I think the convenience of being across the road from the site, being able to manage it closely, was very attractive to us. So we had quite an unusual building contract arrangement, but it worked for us because we knew we wanted to be heavily involved.
Yep. And then going back to that feeling of when it first got priced and it came in over, because that's something that unfortunately clients have to deal with sometimes. Do you remember how that sort of felt?
So many emotions. My brain couldn't process that comment, that question. Look, it was very daunting because as the person driving the design and as the client, I was responsible and angry at the same time. So it was sort of a very big conflicting experience for me because I knew this project would be the next 15 to 20 years for us. So I wasn't as willing to compromise as I would be if I was just working with a residential client, because I had to live in it and I was designing it. The decisions impact my daily enjoyment for the next 20 years. I just kept holding on to this stuff and holding on to this stuff. And Jimmy, my hubby, he agreed. He thought those things were integral in the design, but we just weren't. We did manage to claw it back. Then COVID happened and the building boom happened. And yeah, we had a significant price increase. So all that money we clawed back just ended up coming back in.
So with the builder, what was the structure? Was it like a design and construct, or was it still a lump sum with some provisional sums in it?
It was essentially cost plus, but the costs were very accurate and based on a tender. So it's like we tendered the project and the costs that we got before we started the build were very accurate. There were, I don't know, a handful of PC sums in the mix.
So PC sums or PS sums, which are prime cost or provisional sums, both of these are items which are put into a building contract that don't have a fixed cost. So it'll often happen when the costs aren't known. A common example of this would be your earthworks. Quite often earthworks can't be worked out. There could be, car bodies in the ground, rock, who knows. So typically earthworks will be a provisional sum. There could be other selections that you haven't made, and PC sums could be used for these items. And basically it's just understanding that the difference in what this costs will either be a reduction in your building contract value or it'll be an increase. So if these sums are too low, it's going to add more costs that you didn't see coming. From the reverse side of things, if they are overinflated, that will be money which will be coming back into your pocket.
I I don't know, a handful of PC sums in the mix. So we went in, I think we had maybe a 50 grand contingency built into that, and there were only a few items in there which were PC sums. So we felt relatively confident with that. Yeah. But the thing that caught us completely off guard was the construction pricing increasing without scope change. Like steel went up 40%, timber went up 40%, bricklaying tripled in cost. We had a few total curveballs along the way. Like, we had selected our bricks based all of our construction drawings off this brick, all of our ceiling heights designed to meet the brick, the tints in our oxide were to match the brick. And then our builder was at the brickyard and called me and said, your bricks are gone. And at the time, this brick supplier was actually recently sold and purchased by a developer, and they told us they destroyed them. We've crushed them. And I said, that doesn't sound right. No, it turns out they were sold at auction. And I had a contact at the developer, so I got in contact with them, and I need to know who you sold them to. I need a name. So we got the name of this guy, some guy wanting to build a shed out in Banjo. Yeah, literally shaking it out of people. And so our builder is contacting him, and we were getting them for maybe 45 cents a brick. And this guy out in Banjo, oh yeah, you can have them, $3 a brick. And my default is just full fight mode, like threats and yelling, and I just was like furious that this could have happened, but also just not willing to accept that this could be possibly happening. But our builder is just such a calm, considered, there will be a solution, it's fine. Got calmed down. Jimmy and Louis are very calming for me, and he managed to get him right down in price, not to what we were originally paying. And then because I kicked up such a fuss with the brick supplier, they didn't quite free issue, but they so heavily discounted all the maxi bricks, it almost compensated for the cost increase in the face bricks. That took 4 months. That whole process, getting this home done as quickly as we could, was the right decision for the overall family well-being. But it took a lot of energy and a lot of hours and a lot of juggling, trying to maintain a home and look after young kids that aren't sleeping, and getting lots of phone calls with issues like this, and running around sourcing bricks. Like, I was doing all that legwork, not our builder.
So we lost 4 months there.
Yes.
What else happened that, time point of view, just couldn't be planned for and blew out timelines? Or?
There's probably only like a small handful of things that were the big contributors. I requested my builder to get a price from several Sparkies, but one particular that I'd worked with commercially, and they priced it fairly. There were no mates rates going on. There were no like deals or anything on the side. It was sort of just like, fair, this is the price, let's get going. But they don't do a lot of resi work. They're very embedded in big commercial projects, and the resi stuff just isn't a priority in the scheme of that. And I fully understand that. But, you know, we had probably 2 or 3 to 4 month periods where we just didn't hear back from them. And like all trades had to stop work waiting for this next round of electrical work to happen. You know, we got to the point, this had already happened once, we got to the point where the driveway was going in. And at the time, the building industry was explosive, and locking trades in took months of planning, and the concreters were coming in May, I think it was, or March. No, they were coming in Feb, and they couldn't come back till like May or June if we missed deadline for the mains power. And I think in the end we had to say, we're going to have to fire you or turn up and put the mains power in, because we can't lose another 4 months waiting for these concreters to come back to do the driveway. Like 4 months at the time felt like a lifetime, you know. And so we did turn up, we got it done. But, you know, it's stressful and it's horrible having to think about firing a contractor, subby, to keep the project moving along. I mean, especially electrical work or any of the services, because we've got a house that's half built, and then I've got the last 2 years of history to then brief to someone else with a contractor who's been fired, so he's not coming back to do that for me. And then where do my warranties sit? Do you know what I mean? Like, if anything goes wrong electrically, one's always going to blame the other. And so I was like, I can't get rid of him. He's so important, his knowledge. And when he was here, he did an incredible job. The skill set, this home is so complex electrically. And so it was lots of phone calls and playing the long game and trying to motivate people in a very difficult time for the building industry. But, you know, he turned up, we got there, the driveway went in. Oh.
And then in terms of, were you renting somewhere else, or where were you living during all of this?
We were fortunate enough that my parents had a rental, so it meant we weren't locked into 6 or 12 months, or we didn't have to be committing to new time frames every time this build extended. But that was in Canning Vale, and we're in Wembley Downs. So when my little girl started school, which is at the end of our street, the house we're in now, it was taking an hour and 20 minutes to get her to school in the morning, and then a 45-minute drive home. I needed a site meeting in the day, 35 minutes back, 35 minutes home. And I had a 1-year-old that was being traipsed around the countryside, didn't love the car. And so at home time, it was the same, about 45 minutes here and then an hour and a half home. So, and at the time, we just couldn't find a rental. I applied for probably 30 rentals and just couldn't get one close to the build. So we decided to, on school nights, sleep at my parents', which meant packing up half the house with all the stuff you need for 2 young kids and lunch boxes and baby monitors and whatever. So we did that 4 nights a week and then lived back out at Canning Vale, not on school nights. And then the packing became such an impost on our lives. We just asked Mum and Dad, could we please come and just live with you while this last bit of the build is finishing? But, living with your parents has its own set of challenges, but that proximity to the build just won out entirely because I was here a lot more. I was here maybe 5 times a week, briefing the trades, reviewing their work, dealing with issues as they came up, and I just couldn't have done that living so far. Yep. And in hindsight, if I'd known, we thought we'd move in March 2023, and it wasn't till the end of November. And I think if I had the hindsight I have now, I would have tried harder to get a rental. I think it would have been better for everyone. The stress of young kids living with their grandparents full time and not having your own space. I mean, Jimmy and I found it very difficult with the money stress and the time stress and all the conversations we had to have around that, to do that on top of my parents. They didn't have their own space. They had young kids screaming all the time. Like, they're past that phase of their lives, so I wish I had had the hindsight of the time it was taking to finish, so that I could have, a year earlier or 2 years earlier, just looked harder for a rental. But, by the time I was like, I should get a rental, it was the toughest time to rent, do that stuff.
Are there any moments or particular aspects of the build that stand out for you as quite tricky in terms of going, okay, like, that's a big amount, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z, and it was challenging to do it and still commit to the design narrative?
The pool window was super contentious all the way along. Like, it's such a small part of the home, but it's such a luxury item. Like, it seemed like every single person we spoke to said, just delete it. But it's an underground room in the basement, and it would be very dark and dank and not attractive to spend time down there. So, and like, it's like the favourite part of the home for most people that visit, It's such a beautiful, tranquil experience down there. It sets the lighting, it sets the ambience. So we just held onto it. And it wasn't actually over-engineered. Like, I was looking at the spec. It was 18mm annealed glass, silicone fixed to the little inset in the concrete. It's like, how can this be? Like, I just don't understand how it's going to be that much. Let's just keep it in and we'll get it priced. Keep it in and we'll get it priced. It's an easy thing to delete, in the future. But then we couldn't find a contractor to put it in. No, it's got to be 32mm. It's got to be... And so we went back to our engineer, and he said, well, basically tell them all to go jump, because I'm certifying it. I'm telling you it's going to work. So it was a bit tricky around that situation, because it doesn't matter that we had the certification. If nobody will build it, it can't go in. Do you know what I mean? Like, they still need to back the warranty on the system. So it ended up being, I think, about a $5,000 or $6,000 exercise. But because we held on to it, we got to the point where I think it was initially priced at about $2,000 or $3,000. So it was like, at the time, double the cost. It's another $4,000 flip, these stressful conversations. But it wasn't the $25,000 that we were told it was going to be, that we probably would have made a decision to delete, and I think... Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to just do your own research. Like, even if you implicitly trust your builder, if you want to be informed and feel like you're getting the best value and the best outcome, go and educate yourself. Like, the amount of times I would call a window supplier or a pool contractor and just be like, hey, like doing this, like, does this sound reasonable? Is that what you would sort of charge for this? And then that promotes a conversation with your building team or your subbies about why is that so expensive, and not just take everyone's word for gospel. And I think, gosh, I would have lost money 3 times over if I was actually like the paid architect on this job, but it was that level of involvement and perseverance that got a home built to this quality and this caliber for what we spent on the construction.
Yep. I think that's where sometimes it has to sit with the client to do that.
It has to sit with the client, because that level of research and knowledge building, if a builder or an architect were providing that level of service, no one would ever engage them. And it would be completely unaffordable. But I think it's like, it's your asset. It's your future. Just spend the time. Get the knowledge. Speak to everyone that will listen to you.
Yeah. It's interesting because in commercial project management, you have that project sponsor who's the internal, they work for the client and they're a key person who's been involved with typically the business or the project for a long time, and they guide that through, knowing that at the end of it, they'll take ownership of that, so they make sure it stays on track. But I think for a lot of clients, they don't know that needs to be their role, and the rest of the build team are forming just for that project, and then they've got other projects on concurrently, and they're moving on to other things afterwards. But it's you as the client who's going to be spending all the time thereafter.
Yes.
So you have to dwell on those things and think about them and resolve them and push, even when the project team might not want to, because they're like, oh, again with these questions. But it's your job to make sure that the outcome aligns with you, because you're going to be using it at the end of the day. Oh God, absolutely. And I think that's the thing to go into a project, a build project, is just go in eyes open, knowing that it is going to need a lot of your energy and time. And the more you can put into it, the better the outcome will be. Even with the joinery package, I will always insist on this in the future. Write a list of every single thing that has to go in a cupboard and measure them and overlay them onto your joinery drawings. Does your pressure cooker fit in the cupboards you've been given? I do this as well.
Yeah.
People think I'm crazy.
Crazy because, and I think there are ways around it and this and that, and you end up finding somewhere else for that stuff, but it's like, it's not optimal. Whereas if you can just do that exercise and go back to your designer and, hey, I've got these 20 changes because I've got this stuff that doesn't fit, or like the shelf you put in, my cereal boxes are like just 2 centimeters taller than what you gave me. That stuff matters. It's in the right place. It's accessible. It's right next to the cereal bowls. But it's like that's going to take you a good day. Go and measure it all, write your list, mark it all up, brief it to your interior designer. But that's so valuable. That impacts your day-to-day enjoyment with how things are stored.
I think for the client as well, there's a beneficial byproduct, and that's visualization. So doing it, they start to engage with the plan and live through it. They start thinking, this is how I'm going to walk through it. This is how I'll interact with the kitchen. And that's a really beneficial process to support other things that they can be asking and thinking about as well.
Yes, absolutely.
This is a common one for people thinking about a long-term property. How did you approach the number of rooms and the spaces, knowing we're going to have a family? We don't know what that looks like yet, and we don't know how big that family is going to be.
I think a lot of people fall into the trap of trying to do all things, and so it can't be all things to everyone. So we intentionally, when we bought the block, we knew this was a house we were going to be in for 15 to 20 years. We luckily had the foresight into the future that we knew we only wanted 2 kids. But still, we sort of felt the pressure. We had the 3rd bedroom. That was going to be our guest room. Jimmy's family, they live 5 hours away, so they come down and stay with us a couple of times a year. And we'd actually started the build, and we were like, we're nuts. We're nuts. Our kids have these small rooms so that we can have one room that sits empty 98% of the year. And we deleted it because we know we only want 2 kids, and we're not. It was like the market will want a 4-bedroom home. And we said, but no decisions we've made in this whole process have been for the market. So, and we just deleted it. And the kids' rooms aren't excessive, but they're a lot more generous. But then that decision drove the basement room. So the basement room was previously just an airlock. It had the pool pump equipment tucked right down in the corner, a bag drop for school, and it was just sort of a transitionary space. But when the third kids' room got deleted, we moved some walls around in the basement to create a pseudo guest room. It's not a dedicated guest room in that it's got its own door and it's private and all the rest of it. But, you know, if you're sleeping over for 1 or 2 nights, it's acceptable that it doesn't have its own door, that it's not got like a full bathroom. It has a toilet, has a shower. We can close it off in that if we park our cars in the garage, we can just walk to the front door and not have to go through that space, but you can't acoustically seal it. But, you know, it's maybe like 5 to 10 nights a year that someone would be sleeping down there. And it will often be like our friends have come over and we've all had too many drinks and it's like gotten to 11 o'clock at night. So I'll just crash downstairs. You don't need it to be a dedicated bedroom. You just need somewhere to sleep. And so we designed it around that. And at the same time, we were all working from home in COVID and we went, flip, we don't have a home office. And so that room, the cleverest room in the house for us, because we extended it to be able to fit a sofa bed. Then we thought, yeah, we'll put all Jimmy's music gear down there, so it became a music studio. And then we put soft wiring and joinery in to suit a bar fridge if the boys are watching a footy game and, you know, me and my girlfriends are upstairs having a wine. And it's all the joinery and the furniture supports all of those different functions without having to spend money.
Yeah.
You know, and so it just, but we were on site already, and I just think lots of people are reluctant to make these changes on site because everyone kicks and screams and moans, but you're not in a building process to make friends, and your trades are going to whinge, but they will get over it and you'll get the outcome you want. Yeah. And no one was happy about it. We had to speak to the engineer. I had to get the drawings redone. We thought, oh, do we need to get another building permit? Yes, we did. You know, it was annoying for everyone, but that's like the most compelling space of the house. Yeah. And because we were willing to do the hard thing, and now we're reaping the rewards from it.
Yeah. I think basement room doesn't do it justice as well, because that makes it sound so different to how it looks and feels down there.
Yes, it's very true. Yes, the basement room is where the pool window, previously mentioned, resides, and it's a very enchanting space.
It is, because you walk down and you feel like you're looking into a fish tank, and yeah.
Yes, it's pretty amazing.
Worth pointing that out.
Yes.
The basement room.
The bunker.
Yes. And then, should we talk about some of those hidden delights that came through? Because we did a bit of a tour because we're recording in your house, and there are so many little moments that you experience. And for me, when you open the doors and the glass just sort of disappears, and it felt almost a little bit emotional. It's the way that it interacts with the landscapes feels really special. What was it like going through the build process? Because on paper, you go, yeah, that makes sense. But then as these things evolve through the build, were there any key sort of spaces that now you just absolutely love, and there's moments that have been, they've come out of them?
I think the surprising elements of the home that are magic for me are the play of light. And I just don't think any amount of 3D modelling or shadow studies can provide you those magic moments where the water reflects off the soffit and bounces inside and you get this ethereal glow of rippling water. I don't think I knew that we would get refracted light through all of our breezeways and have these beautiful banded rainbows throughout the home that the kids play with and put on their bodies, and that the lighting effect coming through the brick breezeways. And sometimes that interplays with the rippling water effect. And when we open the windows to outside and hear the chirping birds, is such a beautiful, tranquil space. It's just, that's magic for me, because I'm like, far out, the home works. It doesn't just look good. There's so many elements that make it work, that make it really practical.
From where you were expecting the home to come in financially to where it landed, are you able to give a percentage difference with what the...
At the start of the 6 years, it doubled. But our budget incrementally increased. So we didn't keep that budget figure at the start and end up doubling. It sort of grew and grew incrementally. The tough pill to swallow was the COVID pricing. I reckon we had probably $200,000 to $250,000 of variations just attributed to the cost of building and labour and materials, which no one could have planned for.
Yeah.
And that was very difficult and a huge point of stress and conflict for our build, because that's not a small amount of money.
No.
Yeah, and to think like scrimping and saving $1,000 here and $4,000 off the lighting package, and it's like it's such small fry when you're tackling variations like that. And it was really that situation that drove Jimmy and I to have those bigger conversations about, we need to sell that land that we own. Like, we need to pay for this somehow.
I imagine that amount of money was probably similar to the cost of your first build.
Yeah, it was the whole build. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was stressful. But I think one of the most stressful things about that quantum of money is the trades didn't communicate, oh, our price has gone up by X, until a long time after they finished on site. So we got the opportunity taken away from us to say, okay, everyone's now saying that quote they originally did, which was we based our contract on with our builder, no one said before they started, everything's gone up, it's now going to be X. So if we had done that with all those trades and knew, oh, okay, it's going to be a $250,000 variation over the next year, we might have deleted a lot of big stuff. But it was already built. And that was extremely difficult. And I think the lesson I take away from that is, if you're embarking on a project, insist on very frequent cost updates from your builder or your trades. Enforce that there's open dialogue around, are you still building to your quote? Have you held your quote? What's pushing it up? Itemize it for me. And I should have done that. I knew that you need to manage costs and scope very closely. You
felt it at the time.
Oh, I felt responsible for not prompting those conversations, and that I had the knowledge to prevent that happening, and I didn't. I sort of thought, no, like, everyone's talking about the industry going up in pricing, but no one said anything to us. Maybe they're just holding their prices. And I thought, well, gosh, I'll just not say anything and maybe we'll just have a win here. And it just, it really bit us in the arse.
Yeah.
And I thought, I knew that. And I still didn't prompt it, because I thought I might be triggering people to go, oh, yeah, we will put the cost up. And so it was a tricky thing to navigate. But yeah, lots of tough conversations and tears.
I imagine with your background in interior design and in the commercial environment, you're familiar with going to site a lot during the process and picking up on issues early and having quite a structured approach to sort of projects. What are some of those things that you did through this build that helped pick up things and get on top of issues?
I think it's super important to have a kickoff meeting with every trade. And so you just don't know how people are reading or interpreting drawings. I mean, I did most of the drawings, so I knew I had a base level of knowledge that influenced things, but it just might not be obvious to someone with fresh eyes on a set of drawings. So I think whether you as a client do it or you insist that your builder or architect, if you're engaging them in that format, before trades start work, be like, have you understood the drawings? Let's stand on site. Did you notice that the brick set out starts here? Did you note that needs to finish on a full brick? I care that the ceiling P50 detail aligns with brick coursing. So when the ceiling guy's coming in, we just walked through the whole drawing set. They had questions, I would read back, and then I'd come back at least weekly and just look at the progress. No, remember we had that conversation. This needed to be 100 mil offset, not 150 mil offset, and just checking that along the way, because it's a lot more efficient to fix it while they're on site than call them back.
Yeah.
So just understanding the materiality and the order of trades. One of the big lessons, I don't know if it fits in here, but I'll mention it now. Because our process was so slow, one of the trades that was very available and willing to just turn up and get stuff done was our joinery contractor. And I just wanted someone here doing something, I was so like, yeah, if anyone's available, just get them on site. And so a lot of the joinery went in too early, which meant our sparkies had to rip all of it out almost to do their prelay and their cabling. And a lot of it's scratched and damaged. And whose fault is that? With our contract arrangement, it wasn't conventional. So the defects, our builder wasn't here every day managing that. And it just became this huge, tricky situation to navigate about, no one knows where that scratch came from or who did it. No one, who's paying for the protection on the joinery. Like, it was quite difficult. So I think make sure you're talking to your builder and relying on their experience about the order of things, because trying to rush it has implications.
Yep.
Which I even knew, and I still did it.
Or like, how much time did you have to spend as well from a weekly
How
point
much
of view?
time did I have to spend on site? I reckon I was definitely here every single week. Some weeks it was once a week, and probably at most I was here for 5 meetings a week, and it'd always be like 1 to 2 hours.
Yep.
The difficulty for me at the time was my kids weren't in school, and so pretty much every site meeting was with 2 kids running around a construction site. So I found it intensely stressful, because you're just so hyper alert. You're trying to be present in a conversation, like one of the trades is suggesting this is how we build it, or this is how we solve this issue, but your mind's really in 2 places, because at any point in time your child's going to step on a nail or fall on a stake. Or, I couldn't, it just went on for so long, like 3.5 years was too long to be like getting babysitting 5 times a week every time I had to get called out to site. So the experience was stressful in the moment, and I don't really know any other way around that.
Were there any other things that you did to balance that dynamic between the work and kids and the build at the same time?
Lots of very late nights and lots of very early meetings. They were the compromise. I would typically be on my computer from like 10 till 1 or 2 a.m. churning through all that stuff, looking after the kids all day, and then sort of doing this like moonlighting at night, working on the house stuff, which has a cost to your well-being and your ability to be like a patient, pleasant person during the day.
And then in terms of looking back, were there any particular key lessons that you learnt? And it could be things that you might have learnt about yourself, having gone through, I guess, a new process in a way.
Key things I learnt. My big takeaways would be just always get the right professional to do it. If you're trying to get something for less, that's what your outcome will be. The engineering or the materials or the trades, if you want a good outcome, you have to pay for it. You're not going to get the cheapest trade to do the best job. It's just not possible. And then the other big one was, if you're embarking on a build journey, be very insistent on cost transparency and cost detail and the consistency of that information to come. I think everything in a build is about managing expectations, and you manage expectations by not having surprises. I think just you have to really make the decision about, is this an investment home? Is it a 5-year home? Is it a 20-year home? And then make your decisions based on that.
Yep.
Every touch point where you're like, oh, this or that, is it worth spending an extra $5,000 or an extra $20,000 here on these things? Well, it's not our forever home. Does it actually contribute to being able to sell the home for more? No. Well, it's an investment home, so then we shouldn't be making that decision.
Yep.
But if it's a home you might stay in for 20 years or you might sell, well, how can you make that decision,
Yeah.
And so for us, we just knew 100% we were not going to sell this home. We were going to live in it until our kids finished school.
Yeah.
That was our brief. And so when we were making those hard decisions, that's why we didn't move on anything, because I was like, I want it to be that. I'm the one touching the light switches every day. I'm the one that the acoustics will impact. I don't want a room to sit empty and my kids to be squished into tiny space. So all those decisions were made easy, and we had to remind ourselves often of that driving factor. We're like, why are we doing this, or why are we saving this money? Like, this is what it needs to be. This will make a difference to the overall enjoyment of the home. And we definitely along the way knew we were overcapitalizing. We intentionally did that because we felt like the project was an investment in our well-being and our daily enjoyment. And this will be the bulk of our life, and it will be our entire childhood memory for our kids.
Yeah.
And so just having that information was always good to fall back on.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable point, that you do need that guiding approach. For us with our house, it's the 5-year approach, and sometimes my partner Emma will be like, "Oh, let's do it this way." I'm like, "We can't. It's not gonna. This place is gonna make the money based on the 15-minute home open. So that's where we're spending the money on."
Absolutely, and that's a project driver.
Because that saves us more money for our next place, which is for a longer period of time.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like I said, if you're generically trying to make it do everything, it will make your decision-making process a lot harder.
Yeah. And that's absolutely another piece of the process that has to be owned by the client.
Yes. You have so many responsibilities as the client. And if you don't want those responsibilities, you will pay a premium for someone else to take them on.
Yeah, by established.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of advice for listeners, key takeaways for people considering building the 15, 20-year home?
Oh, please do it. Please just embark on the journey. It's so rewarding to live in something that is exactly designed to our lifestyle, our likes, the way we like to spend time in space, and to know the drastic improvement in our enjoyment of, you spend so much time at home. And I just think as people, we invest so much money in going to the gym and nutritionists for dieting, or we're always investing so much in our health and well-being, and we're all meditating and we're all going to yoga classes or we're going on nature walks. Architecture does influence your mental state. It absolutely does. And you can choose to let it influence your mental state in a positive way and make intentional decisions. And by designing your own home, you really craft that experience. Or you can just choose to let it unconsciously impact you negatively, because you end up in a space that doesn't suit the way you like to live, or your likes or dislikes, or, is a home that doesn't have enough storage. So you're overwhelmed with clutter and all these little things. Whether you make that decision consciously or unconsciously, it's impacting you.
Yeah.
So you might as well be intentional about it. And, it was a tough 6 years, but now that we're at the end of that journey, God, it was worth it. And I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you so much for today. It's been a wonderful journey, and thanks for the tour of your home. It's beautiful.
My pleasure. It's my favourite thing to talk about in the whole world. I could be here all day.
I understand why. Thanks very much, Tenille.
Pleasure. Bye.
Thanks for tuning into our episode today. Hope you've enjoyed that and gotten something valuable from that. If you've got any feedback, please head over to australianbuildstories.com and share some feedback. If you've got a build story you want to tell, you can tell us there, or you can also reach us on Instagram or TikTok. For our next episode, we've got a really interesting conversation on it's renovation, but it does touch on neurodivergent spaces and designing spaces for those different neurodivergent tendencies. So make sure you tune in next month for that one. If you are enjoying the podcast, please share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. See you next month.